right, up next we have a panel from Boring to Billions, how RWAs won crypto and what's next. So I will pass the mic back to Dean Condillon, Head of Growth at RWA.xyz.
Hello, long time no see. I'm now going to be moderating a panel on tokenization with people who are much more of an expert than I am. So we're going to welcome the panelists to the stage. We have Barji from Centrifuge. Yeah, what do we want to do for seating? I'll sit here. We have Danning from Pantera and Ray from Grayscale. Cool, actually, why don't we go around and do quick intros. Do you want to go first?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Ray. I lead product and research at Grayscale. We are the world's largest crypto-focused asset manager, and I have been at Grayscale since 2018, so I was lucky enough to help build the company from when it was 5 human beings.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danning. I'm head of research at Pantera Capital. We're a crypto-native venture fund since 2003, and basically, I usually cover DeFi and microstructure research, but also have witnessed so much investment in our team across RWA stack. So excited to be here.
Hello, I am Baji, CEO of Centrifuge. So this is fun for me because usually these RWA panels are all RWA platforms, and now we have some different perspectives on the stage. We were founded in 2017. We're a tokenization platform. We work primarily on the financial product side, so have a T-bill fund that's at about 600 million, a AAA CLO fund, a private credit fund, and then a S&P 500 equity fund. So can speak from the perspective of the institutional asset managers we're working with, the supply side, why they're coming on chain, and then where we're seeing demand for these products on chain.
Yeah, Barji, why don't we start with you actually? Why has real-world assets taken off this cycle? I mean, you've been around for a few cycles. Real-world assets, of course, were a thing in 2021, but they hadn't faced the same sort of explosion of growth. Why do you think we face this exponential growth now?
There's a lot of factors that went into play that make this time different than previous times. Previous times were, what we found was there was really this adverse selection bias where a lot of the products that were being tokenized and the folks that were looking at tokenization as a solution, there really wasn't demand for those types of assets. So they would come on chain and they would not be able to drive any growth or any activity into those products. When that started really changing was when the DeFi rates went down and when T-bill rates went up. So when the risk-free rate was at 5-6%, then an on-chain allocator, and primarily what that demand side looked like were stablecoins, they want to access T-bills instead of the traditional crypto yield products that they had access to. So that's where we started to see this inflection where there was actually some product market fit and some demand on chain for real world assets. Then we had BlackRock and Larry Fink take the microphone and start talking about tokenization and giving the industry a lot of coverage around the ability to innovate and build and removing that reputational risk of being early for these types of products. And then we had regulatory clarity in the US and a lot of actual activity happening in the administration trying to build structures where there is comfort and there are ways in which you can safely and compliantly build on chain. So the combination of RWA yields becoming interesting, asset managers putting their brand behind these types of products, and then regulatory clarity have led to this perfect inflection point where we are in a position where we're seeing real growth.
Yeah, I think I want to double tap on the regulation environment for sure. As someone who were working in DeFi protocol, 0x Uniswap was the first one getting penalty and getting court basically stuff, and until this recent administration, and we've experienced market maker. We're trying to market make on DeFi, but then they shied away because of unclear regulation, stuff around it. But this cycle is different because now with the bill is so clear and institutions and banks are now not worried about those concerns. And we've seen a lot more like DeFi experiments, for example, like Apollo is buying out more and more like Morpho treasury. And so basically asset managers now can basically expose those to their like traditional and financial investors. And I think recently there's a news about like BlackRock also tapping into Uniswap's treasury. And so basically like you are gonna access like liquidity through Uniswap X trading. Basically it's provided by BlackRock, and which means also in the counter side, as a retail, you have your money in BlackRock, your yields may come from a DeFi protocol now. So it's like pretty exciting.
So actually, just on that note, this is something Barju and I were talking about before backstage. You mentioned institutional demand. I think we can all agree a lot of assets are being tokenized, and like I showed on my slide, JP Morgan tokenized their own money market fund, obviously BlackRock's Biddle, so a lot of assets are being tokenized and the supply side is pretty secure, but are you seeing institutions actually purchase tokenized assets in waves, or are they kind of more so just experimenting?
I mean, I think like it's not only just tokenization, but also there is like company that's experimenting with new type of assets, issuing like, for example, Figure got IPO'd. And so it's not only distribution of traditional assets. So and then there's also like, I see it kind of like a stack of like a supply chain, right? Like you have different components. And so when you have all these assets distributed or issued on chain, you need also people to encourage the utilization of it. And so like payments like built by CoinFlow, and where like they're allowing e-commerce or like a gaming company to get usage of all these on-chain assets are definitely key component to those. Institution sides, I'm curious how you guys have seen.
Yeah, so I think from my view, I agree with what my panelists have said. It's great to start seeing this product market fit. I think the regulatory backdrop plays a role. I think institutions don't want to be left out, and this is a way for them to not sit on the sidelines as we see the proliferation of blockchain and crypto. I think that primary, secondary is interesting to focus on, because at the end of the day, we can put anything on a blockchain. Like we could put my self-esteem on the blockchain, and it's not going to matter if there's no capital velocity, if no one wants to buy and sell it. So to me, it's just really early. So like what, 0.02% of all assets have been tokenized. And the real opportunity is around future generations. Because we have brokerage accounts, but I think there's a world where there are future generations that are not interacting with the financial services world in the same way, and they might be more crypto native and have wallets, and they are likely to still want economic exposure to the assets that we invest in today. So to me, it's just very early, and we need to think about it from a long game perspective.
Where we're seeing the demand right now is from on-chain capital allocators, so stablecoins and foundations and treasury managers. And that's because they don't have access to these traditional products in other access points. So they don't have a traditional bank account. They can't just easily buy a T-bill, so they're buying the tokenized version of a T-bill. We're not seeing new capital come on chain for these products because it's easier and it's cheaper for them to just buy the traditional product. So why would you buy a tokenized T-bill if you can just buy the T-bill? Same with, we have JAAA. It's a AAA CLO fund managed by Janus Henderson. The ETF is a $25 billion ETF. You can just buy that, don't buy the tokenized version. However, where it starts to get interesting is when the tokenized version does actually become better than the traditional version. So you mentioned Apollo. We have a product that we're building that we have live with Christine at Apollo. It's her private credit fund. And it's a quarterly redemption fund. The yield's about 9%. On chain, we have two strategies that make that product actually better on-chain than off-chain. So there's a liquidity facility that offers daily liquidity for a fee. So instead of the quarterly redemption cycle off-chain, you can get instant liquidity on-chain. And then it's actually available on Morpho. So you can buy the product, you can deposit it into Morpho, you can borrow against that, and you can loop it. So when there becomes this interesting looping arbitrage where borrow rates are 2% and the RWA yields 9%, then you start to see a new segment of buyers on chain that are interested in these products. But then also Christine and Apollo are talking to their traditional customers and compelling them to come on chain and to actually access the tokenized version. So that's where it becomes really interesting, is when that tokenized version has better liquidity, has better utility, and operationally is more efficient than the off-chain version.
One question on liquidity, and specifically secondary liquidity. I'm seeing a lack thereof, and just zero or almost zero to no secondary liquidity. What's bottlenecking that right now? An open question to any panelists. Is it regulatory reasons, market structure? What do you think's hindering secondary liquidity?
In my view, it's just like Baji said, it's the lack of the need for a lot of today's capital allocators to go on chain to get a thing, and that's what I think could change in the future.
What's the catalyst to change that?
A new generation of investors that are more comfortable interacting with crypto wallets and are not using the on-ramps into the financial system the way that we do today.
So when you say a new generation of investors, does that mean you don't see kind of traditional institutions necessarily allocating on-chain because they already have access to these products? Or what would that mean for traditional institutions and how they interact with tokenized assets?
I think they could. I think at the end of the day, you're going to see secondary liquidity take off over time where there is a benefit. So you fractionalized something that needed to be fractionalized. You have, taken, for instance, something that could only trade 9 to 4, 9 to 5, and given it 24/7 rails. You have created an additional layer of liquidity or faster settlement that was an actual bottleneck before. I think at the end of the day, a lot of the financial products today are more or less efficient. So for me, it comes back to where are you actually changing capital velocity and kind of speed and those factors, and then at what point are you serving a new set of customers that are actually wanting to get exposure to the same things on chain.
I feel like this question maybe go back to a little bit from what I was mentioning earlier, which is building the utilization layer for the on-chain assets. So okay, there are all these stable coins today, and we know maybe a lot of the countries that are debanked are using it, that people are using that as alternative, but what about on-chain FX or say cross-border payment, building the payment rails and tap that into real-world commerce, merchandise, companies and stores are going to be helpful for the secondary liquidity that you're mentioning here. Yeah.
We're also seeing some interesting use cases on-chain as well around why secondary liquidity is important. So you want to have atomic settlement. You want to be able to swap in and out of these RWAs. I think Athena was early in this strategy where they worked with BUIDL, and when the basis trade rates went down, they would swap into the T-bill product. So these types of yield products, where it's either a basis trade or it's any sort of DeFi yield structured product on chain, where they can start to have RWAs as part of their overall portfolio. Then as crypto rates move, they have this floor yield, which is provided by a safe and stable asset. So that's where there's still quite a lot of opportunity and growth around the drivers for demand for RWAs from the existing on-chain allocators and a lot of the builders that are coming. And that's where when you're mentioning stablecoins and fintechs and apps and all of these new consumer-facing products that might not even necessarily market themselves as Web3, but are using tokenized products in the background for better settlement and better liquidity, is where I think we can start to see quite a big growth and jump in how these are used across chain.
Maybe one more thing to add is I think there is still some compliance risk that a lot of the institutions are facing. We can see evidence so much inflow from ETFs, great, but if you're trying to deploy your liquidity into a on-chain vault, then it's who are your KYC? And so seeing companies that's building the compliance framework to offload that concern and regulatory risk to away from the institution can be also helpful.
This following question may be a bit controversial as we have a variety of different players on the stage, but maybe I'll point this to Baji first. who wins in the tokenization race and which layers will get commoditized? We have issuers, we have the asset issuers, we have platforms, we have chains. Do you see any of them getting commoditized, and who will kind of lead the way?
I think probably many of them get commoditized. We have historically been focused on tokenization and just bringing these products on chain. I believe that will become commoditized. So where we're shifting our focus is, you called it the orchestration layer, but how do we connect these? How do we become the DeFi strategist for these large institutions? So we can tokenize their product, but then what? How do we integrate it into DeFi protocols? How do we create utility and liquidity and actually create this layer across DeFi where any product can be multi-chain, multi-protocol, and atomic and move at the speed of DeFi, not at the speed of traditional finance and RWA. So I think where we view the most opportunity and moat in the future is actually being that orchestration layer for RWAs across DeFi.
Yeah, I definitely feel like stablecoin issuers can be commoditized. Like just seeing from, for example, don't know if you guys remember, like PerpDex Hyperliquid gets so much traffic, and like people are like, wait, Circle just sitting there earning all these yields by being used as a main settlement payment currency, and there's all these people are like bidding for becoming the stablecoin of that, and you can see the margin getting pushed lower and lower in the competition. So definitely issuers. I think another commoditized layer will be something like clearing layer or like settlement layer, where like you're basically just like kind of doing the swaps on chain, and there's a lot of mature DeFi aggregators infra that can provide that. So it seems very competitive to me as well. So.
Not so controversial after all. I guess I agree. So I think, look, right now there is, a way for value to accrue to the L1s. Over time, I think that does become commoditized. I think value concentrates on a smaller number of chains that, have the right compliance infrastructure, the right speed, scalability. And so then value accrues elsewhere in the stack. And I think that maybe it does come down to like the underwriting choices you make. I do think there is money to be made if you're an issuer. And then I think the orchestration layer can be really meaningful.
Maybe one thing that's slightly controversial is who owns the customer. So the distribution side is something we personally have gone back and forth on a lot. I talked to a lot of our VCs about. And our strategy is B to B to C, because we don't want to compete with Robinhood and Coinbase and all the exchanges to own the customer. And when real TradFi comes on chain and Apollo's curating products and Fidelity's building their own curation strategies, we won't win against these massive players that already own the customer. So the position we're playing in is, we started at the bottom layer, which is tokenization, and now we're moving up the stack, and we'll build everything up to distribution, and then we'll plug into those platforms that already own the customer.
Maybe also one counterpoint I'm curious you guys take, which is issuers that are coming from different country and regions. I feel like they might have their own edge because having the local connection and very localized kind of connection with the regulatory side that is hard to be reached by other countries' issuers. I'm curious, do you see that coming up from non-US stablecoin issuers?
We have a regulated asset management arm that builds all of our funds out of BVI, so we know that jurisdiction very well. They have had very clear structures and strategies for tokenized securities, which is why we chose it. And a lot of the asset managers we're working with aren't ready to take on the regulatory risk and complexity and make that bet. So they want to work with a platform like us to effectively shield them for now. And then as it becomes more clear, what does the US structure look like? What does Luxembourg look like? What do these other jurisdictions look like? Then they'll likely build themselves.
Yeah, I think over time, in the intermediate term, you're going to see tokenization as a way to access other jurisdictions and to get more global distribution.
How do you think about the RWA race when it comes to the chain layer? Will everyone kind of issue on Ethereum? Will issuers focus on privacy chains? Will issuers kind of create their own chains? Who do you think is gonna win from a chain perspective? And floor's open.
We are betting on a multi-chain future. So our structure is that we can seamlessly scale multi-chain. So from the asset management perspective, you can run your entire fund, your strategy on one chain, and then you can distribute to any chain, collect any currency, build on any strategy, and then bring it back to the hub chain. So I think if there's chain abstraction, if there's seamless communication, bridging information between all of the chains, it doesn't really matter how many there are.
I agree. I think in this, just zooming out, right now we're in a world in the near term where, because again, I'm thinking about it from an investment lens, you're rewarded for having a broad, kind of being broad, right? If crypto is democratized access to VC, I think over time you're going to have value concentrate, not on like one or two chains, but a handful of chains. And I think composability is going to play a key role. And I think that's also going to drive just commoditization across a handful of chains.
Yeah, just that, echoing all these. And I think one thing you guys mentioned earlier, which is distribution is a power, which is also the key for this question. I feel like Tempo as a stablecoin chain that they just announced the launch, hasn't really launched the product, but they already announced the, partnership with DoorDash. So yeah, in real world, people are gonna like settle their stuff through whatever app they're using to whatever the back end will be. So we'll be multi-chain, but also depending on the distribution power.
Whilst we have a couple minutes left, let's go round and do some predictions. Can be anything relating to tokenized assets. And what fancy predictions do you have for us?
Well, I think I did mine. I think that I think the generation of people that are maybe like, I don't know, kids, teens today, I think that there's going to be a world where they're going to access traditional assets through the blockchain, through crypto wallets.
Yeah, I think also we'll have more normal, like people having access towards like private investment, for example, like the companies that is not IPO, that have private equity, maybe now going to be tokenized, and people will allocate more risky investment, and I see that. And also I see like basically the mingling of the TradFi and the DeFi, where we mentioned earlier, like if you're a bank customer, you might be actually getting your yields without knowing that your money is on chain.
100 billion by end of year?
What, distributed asset value? Yes. There we go. Now we're talking.
Only distributed. That's what we care about.
Cool. Well, now we can wrap up. Let's give the panelists a huge round of applause. Thank you for everyone's time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.